I was holding a shotgun in my hands. No, not to shoot. Just to remind myself who I used to be. Mary screamed from the balcony, wrapped in nothing but a robe. A new neighbor, Robert, stood in my backyard, barefoot, shirtless, pale like a ghost. He had that look, like a man who'd been caught stealing from his own father. But I didn't lift the barrel. I didn't yell. I didn't even blink. I pressed record on my phone. Then I walked back inside like nothing happened. You probably think I'm crazy. 73 years old, living in the same house I built myself back in 1975, with a woman I met in high school, married after Vietnam, raised 3 kids with, buried one. 50 damn years. And she throws it away for a man who moved in across the street 6 months ago. A retired insurance adjuster. Drives a clean Ford. Wears cologne that smells like hand soap. Calls me buddy every time he sees me. It started small. A change in her routine. Mary would dress up to go grocery shopping. She started wearing lipstick again, deep red, the kind she stopped using when we hit our 50s. She was more careful with her phone. Always facing it screen down. Always smiling at nothing. I didn't say anything at first. I thought maybe she was just going through a phase. Old age does weird things to people. Maybe she just wanted to feel young again. Then came the note. No envelope. Just a piece of white paper in my mailbox, written in black ink. She's not who you think she is. Check the garden camera. Thursday. Midnight. That was it. No signature. No threats. Just a warning. I almost laughed. Thought it was a prank. But I had installed a security camera out by the garden shed last fall, after some local kids trashed a neighbor's pumpkin patch. I pulled up the footage for that night. At 11:59 p.m., Mary stepped outside in her robe. She looked around. Then Robert appeared, walking in from the side yard like he owned the place. They kissed. Like teenagers. Long, slow, deep. Her hands in his hair. His hands on her back. I didn't watch the whole thing. I sat there for 3 hours, staring at the black screen after it ended. Not moving. Not crying. Just cold. The next morning, I got up at 5 a.m. like I always do. Made coffee. Fed the dog. Took my pills. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. That day, I went into town and bought 2 more cameras. One for the hallway. One for the bedroom. If they were going to burn my life down, I was going to keep the ashes. The next few weeks were a game of masks. I smiled when she kissed my cheek. I listened as she told me how tired she was, how shopping took longer because of traffic. I nodded when she mentioned Robert in passing, how kind he was, how he offered to help fix the gutter. I saved every clip. Every audio file. Every whisper. And then last night happened. They thought I was out fishing. I had even left my tackle box in the truck and dropped a line in the riverbank for show. But I was in the basement, watching the hallway feed. I watched Robert sneak in through the back door at 10:45 p.m. Watched them disappear into the bedroom. At 11:12 p.m., I went upstairs. I didn't say a word. Just opened the door. Robert froze. Mary gasped. She pulled the blanket up like that made a difference. I didn't shout. Didn't curse. I just stared. Then I turned, walked outside, and stood in the yard with my shotgun. Why? Because I wanted them to feel fear. Not for their lives, no, I'm not a killer. But for their story. Their version of events. Their future. You betray a man like me, you don't get to control the narrative. This was just the beginning. The next morning, Mary made pancakes. She hadn't done that in years. Said she felt grateful for everything I'd done for the family. Kissed me on the forehead. Called me her rock. She didn't know I had 4 hours of video saved to a USB drive hidden behind the breaker panel in the garage. I watched her move through the kitchen like nothing happened. Humming an old Patsy Cline song, her robe tied tighter than usual, like she thought modesty could erase sin. I nodded, ate in silence. She asked how the fishing trip was. I lied and told her I caught 2 trout. She smiled. She was getting better at lying. So was I. That day, I drove into town and met with Hank Mullins. Old friend. Used to be a detective, now runs a pawn shop. The kind of guy who doesn't ask questions unless he needs to. I asked if he still had access to the kind of equipment we used back in the day, recorders, hidden mics, long-range audio. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. Didn't even ask why. Still got some old toys, he said. You need eyes, ears, or both? Both, I said. He went into the back and brought out a small black case. Inside was a set of wireless transmitters, disguised as smoke detectors, and a pen with a microphone in the clip. I gave him $500 in cash. He handed me the gear and a pack of chewing gum. Put that in your shirt pocket, he said, tapping the gum. It's a camera. Records an hour. That night, I climbed into the attic and installed the smoke detector above our bedroom. Took me 20 minutes, and she never knew. The pen went on the nightstand. I didn't sleep much. Over the next week, I collected footage. More kisses. More whispers. One afternoon she said she was going to the church choir, but I watched through the hallway camera as she let Robert in not 10 minutes after I left. I counted the steps he took up the stairs. 12. I'd know that rhythm anywhere. Each night, I sat in the basement, headphones on, watching the footage. I took notes. Times. Phrases. The way she said his name, slow, soft, with a breath at the end. That breath used to be mine. I wasn't watching because I wanted to hurt myself. I was building a case. In Vietnam, you didn't strike first. You studied your enemy. You learned his patterns. His weaknesses. You let him think he had the upper hand, and then you hit him where he never saw it coming. I was never one for computers, but my grandson had shown me how to organize files. I created folders by date, labeled every clip. October 9th, entry through back. October 12th, bedroom audio. October 14th, lie about grocery run. It was a museum of betrayal. A digital confession. And then I found something strange. One morning, Mary left her phone on the table when she went to the bathroom. I heard it buzz. A text from I didn't touch it. I just read what showed on the screen. Same time Thursday. Miss you already. But below it, another name caught my eye. L. Newer messages. Shorter. Different tone. I'll take care of him. And then, he suspects nothing. That wasn't about Robert. It didn't make sense at first. Who the hell was L? Why would Mary be texting someone else about me? What did take care of him mean? The next day, I called Hank again. You ever run a reverse lookup on a number? I asked. Once or twice. You got something? I gave him the number from Mary's phone. He said he'd call me back. 2 hours later, he did. It's registered to Elisa J. Kessler. Lives in Springfield. Age 52. Used to work in the county court office. Divorced. No priors. I sat back in my chair. Lisa. The name rang a bell. I couldn't place it at first, then it hit me, Mary's cousin. Estranged. Hadn't seen her in years. The last time I heard her name, Mary called her a snake in lipstick. And now she was texting her about me? Something was off. That night, I confronted Mary, not with anger, but with curiosity. Didn't you used to talk to your cousin Lisa? I asked casually while we ate dinner. She paused. Just for a second. A flicker in her eye. No, she said. Haven't spoken in years. I nodded, pretending to accept it. Inside, I felt the shift. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. This wasn't just about an affair. It was a plan. I didn't know what yet, but I would. As she went to bed that night, I sat in the basement with the lights off, watching her silhouette move across the screen. The soft thud of her footsteps down the hallway. The creak of the mattress. The sigh. She thought she'd fooled me. She thought she was still in control. She had no idea I was 10 steps ahead. And by the time I was done, she wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose everything. On Monday morning, I trimmed the hedges. It was 6:30 a.m. Still dark. Cold enough that the grass crunched under my boots. I didn't need to cut them. But I wanted to see Robert. He came outside right on time, 7 a.m., like every day. Slippers, bathrobe, cup of coffee, acting like he owned the neighborhood. He waved. I waved back. But I kept the trimmer running as he walked past, just loud enough that he had to speak louder. Morning, Jack. Beautiful day, I said, smiling. That smile was a warning. The same one I gave in '68 when a kid aimed a rifle at my squad from the jungle. Cold. Controlled. Final. I watched his eyes. He hesitated, just for a second. Then forced a grin and shuffled back into his house. Like a man who knows the floorboards are about to break. Back inside, Mary was making scrambled eggs. Again. She hadn't cooked this much since our kids were teenagers. She was trying to play house. Trying to cover the smell of fear with butter and eggs. She asked if I wanted toast. I said no. My appetite was dying by the day, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of asking why. I ate in silence. Then, without looking at her, I said, "You ever talked to Lisa lately?" She froze for half a second, then cracked an extra egg into the pan. No, like I told you. Haven't heard from her in years. Hey, I said, sipping my coffee. Funny. I thought I saw her number pop up on your phone last week. Must have been someone else. I didn't press. Just planted the seed. Let it rot in her mind all day. That afternoon, I went to the county records office. Told the clerk I was researching for a family trust issue and needed public property info. Found Lisa's address. Then used an old trick, mailed her a blank envelope with a fake law firm name and a return address in Kansas. I wanted to see if she'd contact Mary. If she would panic. 2 days later, Mary got a call. I saw her on the porch, pacing. She looked tense. Her voice was low, but the hallway MIC caught a few lines. They are digging. No, I don't think he knows yet. I'll handle it. That was enough. Now I knew she wasn't just cheating. She was hiding something bigger. Something tied to Lisa. Maybe money. Maybe secrets from the past. Maybe legal. I didn't care what it was yet. I just wanted it to burn. The next night, I went to the VFW hall. Old-timers meet every Wednesday for poker and cheap whiskey. I hadn't been in 6 months. Jack, one of them shouted when I walked in. Hell, we thought you were dead. Not yet, I said. But I might start digging graves. They laughed. I smiled. But inside, I was calculating. One of the guys there, Dennis, used to work private security. I bought him a drink, waited until the others got loud with their stories, then leaned in. You still have connections for background checks? He gave me a look. Then a slow nod. Need something on a woman. Lisa Kessler. And a man. Robert Ellis. I want anything. Finances, history, arrests, affiliations. You paying cash? Always. He told me it would take a few days. I told him I had time. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I printed every photo I had from the footage. Put them in an envelope. Addressed it to myself. Why? Because when the time came, I wanted proof that this wasn't just revenge. It was justice. The next morning, I watched Mary get ready for book club. Hair curled. Perfume on. A light blue sweater she wore only when she wanted attention. She kissed my cheek. Don't wait up, she said. I smiled. Then I followed her. 10 minutes after she left, I grabbed my truck keys and drove slow, keeping 3 cars behind. She turned into the parking lot of a small cafe on the edge of town. Book club wasn't meeting. There were no cars there except hers. And Robert's. I parked across the street, behind a row of bushes. Watched them through binoculars. They sat on the patio, alone, her hand on his. He was laughing. She was leaning in close. I took pictures. Lots of them. But I wasn't going to confront her here. No. Not yet. Later that evening, I printed one of those photos. Put it in a blank envelope. Left it on her pillow. When she found it, I pretended not to notice. She stared at me across the living room, eyes searching for anger, for threat, for something. But I didn't give her anything. That silence, that was the weapon. You see, rage is predictable. Yelling is forgivable. But silence? Silence makes people imagine things. Makes them unravel. And that's exactly what I wanted. This wasn't about catching her anymore. This was about watching her fall apart, piece by piece. 3 days later, I got a call from Dennis. You gonna want to sit down for this, he said. I didn't. I stood in my garage, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the old workbench I built with my father back in '74. The smell of sawdust and oil was comforting. Steady. Unlike what I was about to hear. Robert Ellis. Clean record on paper, Dennis began. No arrests, no bankruptcies. But here's the thing, he's not Robert Ellis. I didn't say a word. Real name's Richard Evans. Changed it legally in '99 after a lawsuit, sexual misconduct. Settled out of court. Then again in 2007, different state. Woman dropped the charges. But this guy's not clean, Jack. He just knows how to disappear. My grip on the phone tightened. And Lisa? I asked. Dennis hesitated. She worked at the county clerk's office back in the early 2000s. Around the same time your wife filed a quitclaim deed on your house. That stopped me cold. A what? Quitclaim deed. Transfers ownership of property. Looks like Mary transferred part of the house, your house, into her name only. And Lisa processed it. When? 2004. My legs felt heavy. I sat down on the old tool chest. She never told me, I said. More to myself than to Dennis. No reason she would, he replied. It was internal. No flags. Quiet. But legal. The walls around me went still. Even the ticking clock on the shelf sounded distant. She'd been planning this for decades. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just sat in the living room, lights off, listening to the sounds of the house, the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the ceiling. Mary moved quietly upstairs, but every step felt like a betrayal in motion. She wasn't just cheating. She was erasing me. I waited until she fell asleep, then I opened the safe in the basement. Inside were old documents, military discharge papers, family photos, and one small wooden box. Inside the box was my father's wedding ring. He left it to me before he died. Told me, "This is for when everything else goes to hell. So you remember who you are." I slipped it on. It didn't fit perfectly anymore. My fingers had thickened with age, but I kept it on anyway. The next morning, I acted normal. Made coffee. Sat on the porch. Mary brought me a glass of orange juice, kissed the top of my head, and said she'd be out most of the day, shopping, she claimed. I nodded. After she left, I went upstairs and opened her closet. Inside, behind the dressers, was a small lockbox I'd never seen before. I used a screwdriver to pry it open. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. Some from Robert, others from Lisa. Plans. Conversations. Mentions of me. Discussions about when the time comes. One line stood out, written in Lisa's sharp, slanted hand. He's old. He won't fight. He'll just give up. I laughed. Out loud. Then I carefully placed everything back and left the closet exactly as it was. They thought I was weak. That was their fatal mistake. That afternoon, I met with an attorney. Quiet office on the east side. Young guy, sharp, respectful. I laid out everything. Photos. Audio. Deed records. Timeline. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, "Mr. Bennett, we can do this one of two ways. Quiet and legal. Or scorched earth." I looked him in the eye. "Burn it all," I said. He smiled. "I'll get started on asset protection. We'll pull the deed history, lock her out of any new changes. Freeze joint accounts. File a preliminary motion for fraud." "Good," I said. "And I want a new will." He nodded. "Exclude her. Entirely. But keep it quiet. She doesn't need to know." That evening, I cooked dinner. First time in years. Mary came home and smiled like nothing was wrong. Told me I looked handsome in the kitchen. She sat down, ate, drank the wine I poured. She didn't know the bottle had a tiny chip under the label. GPS placed there this morning. She didn't know her car tires were now tracked. That her phone's cloud data was being mirrored to a private server. She didn't know the war had started. But she'd know soon. Later that night, I got a text from a blocked number. It was a photo. Robert, at a hotel. Same clothes he wore earlier. Same time she said she was shopping. Then another photo, Mary, walking into the same room. My heart didn't break. It hardened. Let them play house. Let them pretend. By the time I was done, there wouldn't be a house left to play in. The next morning, I took the box of letters from her closet and laid them out on my workbench in the garage. The concrete floor was cold under my feet, the light from the single bulb above casting long shadows across the papers. I reread each one, this time slower. Dates. Details. Sentences I had skimmed before now burned into my memory. In one letter from Lisa, dated August 2006, she wrote, "Don't worry about Jack. He's too proud to dig into the past. Just keep him busy, keep him tired, and by the time this is over, you'll have everything. Everything. That word sat heavy in my chest. Another letter, from Robert, then still calling himself Richard, talked about taking advantage of the trust older men have in their wives and how once the paperwork is done, no court will bother to question the details. He called her strategic. She called him safe. I wondered how many times she'd read those letters while I was sleeping next to her. I looked around the garage, at the things I built with my hands. The canoe I carved for our 20th anniversary. The birdhouse she never hung. The shelf filled with trophies our boys won in high school. And then I looked at the envelope I'd marked insurance. It was time. I drove across town to the office of Harold Benson, our insurance agent of nearly 30 years. He had been a friend once, back when our kids were in Little League. Now he looked older, grayer, tired. But his eyes still held a spark of respect when he saw me. "Jack," he said, standing up. "It's been a while." "Too long," I replied. "I need to talk about life insurance." He motioned for me to sit. I did. "I want to change my primary beneficiary," I said. He paused. "That would be Mary." "Not anymore," I said flatly. He didn't ask why. He just nodded and pulled out a form. I named my granddaughter instead. The one who always brought me coffee when she visited. The only one who still asked how I was, even when nobody else did. After that, I stopped by the courthouse. Asked for a full deed history on my property. Confirmed everything Dennis had told me. In 2004, Mary had filed a quitclaim deed that removed me from full ownership. The document was signed, notarized, and filed by Lisa Kessler. It was all legal. All clean. Except for the part where I never consented. I walked back to my truck and sat behind the wheel for a full minute, engine off, just staring ahead. She'd been building this escape for decades. And I was about to tear it down, piece by piece. That night, I pretended to be asleep when she came home. I heard her move through the bedroom, quiet, like she didn't want to wake me. She smelled like cheap perfume and hotel soap. She stood next to the bed for a long time. I almost opened my eyes. Almost asked her if she felt proud. But I didn't. Instead, the next morning, I told her I needed to go visit an old army buddy in Kansas. That I'd be gone for 2 days. She didn't ask questions. She didn't care. But I wasn't going to Kansas. I was going to Springfield. I wanted to see Lisa face to face. I drove 5 hours in silence, radio off. My thoughts louder than any engine. When I got to her address, a small ranch-style house with peeling paint, I parked 2 houses down and waited. I watched her through binoculars as she watered her plants, talked on her phone, and laughed like someone who hadn't betrayed her own family. When I finally walked up to her front door and knocked, she opened it with a smile. That smile vanished the second she saw me. "Jack," she said, voice tight. "Mind if I come in?" She didn't answer. Just stepped aside. The inside of her house was neat. Cold. Like a hotel room someone tried too hard to decorate. I sat down without being asked. "I know everything," I said calmly. "The deeds. The letters. The plan." She sat across from me, arms folded. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie," I said. "You're not smart enough for it." Her jaw clenched. Mary was lonely. She was greedy, I snapped. "And you helped her." "Why?" Lisa looked away. "She said you didn't love her anymore. Said you were too busy living in the past. And that gave her the right to erase me?" Lisa didn't answer. I stood up. "I'm not here to beg, Lisa. I'm not even here for revenge. I'm here to let you know something. It's already started. The lawyers. The surveillance. The moves. She looked up sharply. I've already changed the will. Locked the accounts. Pulled the records. You think this is about a marriage? No. This is about legacy. About truth. I walked to the door. She called after me, Jack. Don't do something you'll regret. I turned, looked her straight in the eye. I've spent 50 years regretting the wrong things. Not anymore. And I left. Back in the truck, I finally felt it, the shift. The war wasn't just against Mary anymore. It was against every lie she built on top of my life. And I was going to take it all down. Brick by brick. I returned home just after sunset. Mary was in the living room, watching some reality show she never used to like. She looked up, surprised but not particularly concerned. How was Kansas? She asked, flipping channels. Quiet, I said. Too quiet. She didn't press for details. Just nodded, eyes back on the screen. I walked past her, into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting long shadows across the driveway. Robert's porch light was already glowing. He was home. Perfect. I spent the rest of the evening going through the final folder of evidence I'd prepared. Labeled, "A Public." There were pictures. Video stills. Audio transcriptions. Copies of the deed transfer. I'd laid out everything like a trial case. Not for a courtroom, but for the court of public opinion. I printed everything twice. One copy would be mailed to our church's deacon. The other, I planned to deliver myself. The next morning was Sunday. We hadn't been to church together in months. Mary had gone alone most weeks, saying I needed the rest or wasn't up for it. I let her believe it. I wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted her to keep lying. But that morning, I was dressed and ready before she came down the stairs. Her face tightened when she saw me. You coming? She asked, too casual. Felt like getting out, I said. Seeing familiar faces. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Not in her Sunday dress, not with the good pearls on, not with her lipstick done just right. We drove in silence. When we arrived, she stepped out of the truck first. Smiled at everyone like nothing in her world was broken. Like she was still the good wife, the moral anchor, the woman who always brought deviled eggs to every potluck. But as we entered the church, I peeled off toward the side office. The deacon, an old friend named Charlie, was prepping for the sermon. Jack, he said, surprised. You joining us today? Not for long, I said, handing him the envelope. But I need you to read that. Now. And I need you to decide if the woman sitting in pew 4 should still be allowed to lead the church choir. His face changed. He didn't ask questions. Just opened the folder. I walked out and sat beside Mary. She didn't know what I'd done. 15 minutes into the service, Charlie walked up to the podium, took the mic, and tapped it once. I'm sorry, he said to the congregation. We'll be pausing today's worship for a brief announcement. Mary shifted beside me. Her hands stiffened in her lap. He didn't call her out by name. He didn't need to. He simply held up the envelope and said, this community prides itself on trust. On faith. On accountability. And when that is violated, we must take a moment to reflect. We will be postponing today's choir performance. The leadership will meet this week to review the matter. Whispers rippled across the room. Heads turned. Mary's face went pale. I sat there, still as a rock. After the service, she stormed out ahead of me, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. I followed slowly, calmly. No need to rush. She waited until we got home to explode. "What the hell did you do, Jack?" she screamed, spinning on me in the driveway. "Something overdue," I said. Her eyes blazed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." "No," I said, stepping past her. "You did that to yourself. I just let them see it." She followed me into the house, slamming the door behind her. "I don't know what you think you know, but this is insane. You're losing it." I turned slowly, stared at her, and spoke with deliberate calm. "I know everything, Mary. The letters. The deeds. The hotel. Robert's real name. Lisa's involvement. Your plan." She froze. I stepped closer. "I know you thought I'd just sit and rot in that chair until I died. That you could quietly erase me, take the house, the money, the name." She opened her mouth. Closed it. I kept going. "You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. And your last." Then I walked away. Left her standing in the hallway, alone, trembling, not from fear, but from the realization that the world she'd built on secrets was collapsing. That evening, I got a call from Charlie. "Jack," he said, voice low. "I read everything. It's worse than I thought. I spoke to the board. She's suspended indefinitely. She won't be leading anything here again." "Appreciate it," I said. "She's been lying to a lot of people for a long time," he added. "Not anymore," I said. "Now they know." After I hung up, I sat in the living room, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and turned on the radio. Mary stayed in the bedroom. Didn't come out all night. She knew now. The world was watching. And this was only phase 1. By Tuesday morning, Mary was barely speaking to me. She moved through the house like a shadow, silent and tight-lipped. She didn't ask questions. She didn't throw accusations. That told me everything I needed to know. She was afraid. Not of me. Of what came next. And she was right to be afraid. I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun come up over the neighbor's roof. It was the kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful. Now it felt like waiting for a fuse to burn out. At exactly 7:45 a.m., Robert's garage door opened. He stepped out in a crisp polo shirt, khakis, and that same smug look he always wore. Briefcase in hand, coffee in the other. I waited until he backed his car out and started down the street. Then I followed him. It wasn't hard. He wasn't exactly cautious. He drove 10 minutes to an office complex near the highway, parked in his usual spot, and walked inside. I waited 10 more. Then I got out, walked into the building, and took the elevator to the second floor. The nameplate on the glass door read, Midwest Claims Solutions Insurance and Investigations. Of course. He hadn't left insurance completely. He just repackaged it, probably some consultant title to sound smarter than he was. I walked in like I owned the place. A young receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I need to speak to the office manager." "Privately." She hesitated, then picked up the phone and called someone. 2 minutes later, a balding man in a cheap suit came out, shook my hand, and led me into his office. "I won't take much of your time," I said, placing the envelope on his desk. Inside, a Robert's fake name history, the past misconduct records, the hotel photos, and a short typed statement labeled, "A pattern of unethical behavior in both personal and professional settings." The man opened it. He read the first page. Then the second. By the third, he looked up at me. "Where did you get this? Does it matter?" I said. You have a man on your payroll who's hiding his real name, his legal history, and is actively involved in a personal scandal with a married woman, my wife. I figure that's not the image your firm wants. He swallowed hard. This could damage our brand. I stood up. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came to inform. Do with it what you want. But if I were you, I'd have someone else handling your client meetings by the end of the week. Then I left. Back home, I parked the truck and sat for a moment, engine running. Mary's car was gone. Probably errands. Probably another lie. Fine. I went inside, pulled out the backup flash drive, and uploaded the video footage to a private cloud folder. I labeled everything, added dates, made sure every clip had context. Then I shared it with one recipient, a Roberts Company email. 2 hours later, I got a notification that the folder had been opened. Another hour after that, I saw Robert's car return home. Fast. Too fast. He stormed into his house. 15 minutes later, he came outside again, this time without the briefcase. No polo shirt. No coffee. Just rage. I was sitting on the porch when he came across the yard. You think you clever, he hissed, stopping at the foot of my steps. No, I said calmly. I know I am. He stepped closer. I didn't move. You've ruined my job. My reputation. For what? You think this makes you look strong? I stood slowly, set my coffee down, and looked him in the eye. I didn't do it to look strong, I said. I did it because you forgot who I was. He blinked. I'm not some confused old man, Robert. I built this house with my hands. Raised a family in it. Watched my son go off to war and never come back. I buried more than most people ever hold. And you walked into my life and thought you could take what's mine? He clenched his jaw. I didn't take anything. You took her loyalty. Her mind. And worst of all, you thought you could take my silence. I stepped closer. But I'm done being silent. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to hit me. But he didn't. He turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. That night, Mary came home later than usual. She walked in, set down her purse, and sat on the couch like her legs were giving out. I don't know what you did, she whispered. But he's finished. Fired. They said it was because of you. I said nothing. She looked at me, desperate. Her eyes wet. You're destroying everything. No, I said. I'm revealing it. She started to cry. Not loud. Not for sympathy. The kind of quiet cry people do when they realize the walls are closing in. I walked past her and into the kitchen. There were no winners here. Only truth. And I wasn't done yet. By Thursday morning, the house was silent. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses on your chest like a weight. Mary barely left the bedroom. She stopped pretending to run errands. No more perfume, no more lipstick. Just her, folded into herself like a woman waiting for the end. But I wasn't done. I sat at the kitchen table, sifting through a stack of papers. Legal documents, account statements, property assessments. All printed neatly and organized in folders labeled by month and year. The kind of order that comes only from a man who's waited long enough. At noon, I had an appointment. I drove across town to meet my attorney, Caleb Hart, in his office. He greeted me with the same respect as always, no fake smiles, just the nod of a man who knows when a war is being won. Everything's in motion, he said, as I sat across from him. The financial freeze order was approved. She'll find out when she tries to use the joint credit line. And the property? I asked. Transferred back to your name, pending fraud review. The paperwork from 2004 never should have gone through without your consent. We are building that angle. I nodded. And the new will? Done. Signed. Notarized. Her name is gone. Your granddaughter is now your primary beneficiary. He handed me a pen. This, he said, sliding over a new document, is a petition for asset protection and separation of legal liabilities. It means that if she tries to take on new debt in your name, it won't stick. I signed it. Not with anger. With finality. Caleb leaned back in his chair. I've seen a lot of divorces, Jack, he said. But this isn't divorce. This is war. No, I corrected him. This is justice. Back home, Mary was sitting on the edge of the couch when I came in. She looked up, pale and glassy-eyed. I tried to buy groceries, she said. Card declined. I set my keys on the counter. Must be a glitch, I said, without looking at her. She stood. You cut me off. I poured a glass of water. You cut me off first, I said. Years ago. You just didn't think I'd notice. Her voice cracked. You can't do this. I already did. She stared at me, trembling. I gave you my life, she whispered. No, I said, turning to face her. You leased it. Then you tried to sell the deed while I was still paying the mortgage. She didn't respond. I walked past her, up the stairs, into my study. Closed the door. Locked it. She knocked once. Jack, her voice was thin. Can we talk? No. There was silence. Then the soft pad of her footsteps walking away. In the study, I opened a drawer and pulled out a box. Inside was a photo of our wedding day. She was 19. I was 21. Full uniform. Her in white. Her smile real. I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. That night, I received a call from the church board. They had concluded their review. Mary was permanently removed from her role. Her choir leadership, her community standing, gone. She misused the trust of the congregation, one of them said. And we can't allow that to continue. Thank you, I said simply. They didn't ask me questions. The evidence had spoken for itself. Later that evening, I heard Mary crying in the bathroom. Not dramatic sobs. Just slow, quiet weeping. The sound of someone who finally understands the cost of their choices. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say a word. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the final draft of the legal letter being delivered the next day, a formal notice of divorce, with grounds of fraud and marital misconduct. I didn't want her money. I didn't want the house. I wanted the truth to live on record. The next morning, I made breakfast for myself. Eggs, toast, black coffee. She sat across from me, eyes red, hands shaking. Where do we go from here? She asked, voice barely audible. I looked her in the eye. You go wherever you want, I said. I'm going forward. She reached out, fingers twitching, trying to touch my hand. I pulled mine away. You made your choice, Mary. I'm just making sure you live with it. She didn't reply. I finished my coffee, stood, and walked out the front door. The sun was rising again. And this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. I waited until Sunday to set the final stage. It was my 74th birthday. Mary asked that morning, "Do you want to do anything?" I shook my head. Just a quiet dinner at home. She looked relieved. That was her first mistake. By noon, I had already contacted every one of our children and grandchildren. Told them I wanted one night together. One last family meal. They didn't ask questions. Just agreed to come. I spent the rest of the afternoon setting the table. Every plate, every fork, every napkin placed with the same care I once gave to sandbagging a foxhole. At 5:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. First came our eldest son, Mark, with his wife and their 2 grown daughters. Then came Lisa Jr., our middle child, still wearing her scrubs from the hospital. Finally, little Joe, our youngest, the one who always asked if I needed anything, showed up with his wife and their baby girl. Mary greeted them all with forced warmth. Hugs, small talk, laughter that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was trying to hold the pieces together. Smile like nothing was falling apart. But the cracks were everywhere. Dinner was served at 6 o'clock. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, her old specialties. She even lit candles. I let her have the moment. Let her pretend this was still her home. Then, at 6:45, I stood up. Before dessert, I said, I want to show you all something. A little slideshow I put together. Family memories. They smiled. Thought it was sweet. I walked over to the TV, plugged in the flash drive, and pressed play. The first few photos were harmless: our wedding day, the kids when they were young, Christmas mornings, birthdays, fishing trips. Everyone smiled, remembering. Then came the change. An image of Robert and Mary on the church steps. Her hand on his chest. His hand low on her back. A few photos later, security footage. Robert sneaking into our house. Then audio clips. Her voice, his old. He'll never find out. His voice, once the transfer's complete, we won't owe him anything. Silence fell over the room like a thunderclap. Mary stood. Jack, what are you doing? I looked at the family. Calm. Steady. This, I said, is what your mother has been doing behind my back. With a man who changed his name to hide from his past. With the help of a cousin who forged property transfers. The kids looked stunned. Mark's wife covered her mouth. Joe just stared at Mary like she'd grown horns. I didn't want to do this here, I continued. But I needed you all to see the truth. Not rumors. Not second-hand stories. Proof. Mary tried to speak, but no words came out. I walked over, picked up the remote, and paused the slideshow. I'm filing for divorce. It's already started. She's removed from the will. The house is back under my name. Her accounts are frozen. The church has stripped her of her role. Her lover's been fired. Gasps. Shifting chairs. Confusion. Hurt. She lied, I said. Not just to me. To all of you. 4 years. Joe finally spoke. Mom, is it true? Mary didn't answer. Her hands were shaking. I gave her everything, I said. 50 years. I built this home. Raised this family. Buried a son. And she turned it into a lie. I turned to Mary. This isn't revenge, I said. It's exposure. You chose betrayal. I chose clarity. She collapsed into her chair, face buried in her hands. No one comforted her. No one said a word. After a moment, I nodded to Mark. Help me with dessert, will you? He followed me into the kitchen, still silent. When we came back, the candles had burned low. Mary was gone. Her chair empty. No one asked where she went. No one offered to follow. That night, After everyone left, I walked through the house. Turned off lights. Locked doors. Checked windows. In the bedroom, her things were still there, but I didn't touch them. I slept in the guest room. It was quieter there. And cleaner. The divorce papers were delivered on a Monday morning. I didn't hand them to her myself. That would have made it feel personal, emotional. It wasn't. It was business. Legal, final, clean. A courier knocked at the door while I sipped coffee on the porch. Mary answered in her robe, eyes still puffy from another night of crying. She opened the envelope right there in the doorway. I didn't watch. She stood still for a long time. I could hear the pages rustle behind me. Then the door closed without a word. By lunchtime, she had packed 2 suitcases. She didn't ask where to go. She didn't try to explain or beg or scream. She just walked past me with her bags, paused at the top of the steps, and said quietly, "This house, it used to be ours." I looked up at her. "No," I said. "It was always mine. You just stopped respecting that." She turned, walked to her car, and drove away. No tears. No drama. Just the sound of tires on gravel and the wind blowing through the trees. That night, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't sad. It was mine again. I walked into the bedroom and stood there, alone, for the first time in 50 years. The bed looked bigger. The closet more spacious. The air lighter. I opened the drawer and pulled out the old watch my son gave me before he deployed. It still worked. Still ticked. I wore it for the first time in years. Time had passed. But I hadn't wasted it. The next morning, I drove to the lawyer's office and signed the final financial agreement. Everything was done. Every asset frozen, divided, transferred. Mary got exactly what she was legally entitled to, no more, no less. She had no claim to the house, the vehicles, or the family land. And most importantly, she would never touch another cent of my name again. As I was leaving, Caleb stopped me. "There's something else," he said. "You mentioned once you suspected one of your grandchildren might not be, well." I nodded. "Yeah. The timeline. The look. Something never added up. I had the lab do a discrete paternity test with the sample you gave." He slid a paper across the desk. "Confirmed. She's not yours." I sat down slowly. It wasn't a surprise. Deep down, I had known. But reading it made it real. "Does she know?" I asked. "No. We've kept everything sealed, just like you asked." I folded the paper and tucked it in my jacket. "I don't hate the girl," I said. "She's innocent. But the truth matters. And I'm done living with lies." He nodded. I shook his hand and walked out of the office with nothing but a clean conscience. That evening, I returned home, lit the fireplace, and sat with a glass of bourbon. No music. No noise. Just the crackle of wood and the sound of my own thoughts. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't grieving. I wasn't even relieved. I was just clear. Mary had spent years building a version of herself that didn't include me. A version that smiled at neighbors, led church songs, kissed grandchildren, and betrayed her husband in silence. She thought I'd never find out. She thought, if I did, I'd crumble. But she was wrong. I stood. I watched. I planned. And then I erased her, piece by piece, the same way she tried to erase me. I didn't need revenge. I needed truth. And now I had it. Weeks passed. The house settled into its new rhythm. Friends stopped calling to ask questions. The church moved on. The town forgot. But I remembered. Sometimes, I would see her car drive past. She never stopped. Just slowed down, looked at the house, then disappeared down the road. She had no home anymore. She gave it up when she gave up on me. And I had no regrets. One Sunday afternoon, I was fixing the gutter out front when a woman from the neighborhood walked by. Widow. Kind eyes. Asked if I needed help. I smiled. No, I said. But thank you. She nodded, started to walk off, then stopped. You know, she said, I always thought you were the quiet one in the marriage. Turns out, you were just listening. I looked at her, then back at the house. Sometimes that's all it takes, I said. Listen long enough, and people tell you exactly who they are. She smiled and walked away. I finished the gutter and went inside. There was no music playing. Just silence. But this time, it was a good kind of quiet. The kind a man earns after 50 years of noise.